Welcome back to my Godot tutorial on making an action RPG game. Before I move forward, there is some housekeeping that I would like to take care of, and there's also something about NPCs that I overlooked that we should probably address. So first of all, last time I mentioned that it isn't great practice to modify the dialogue manager in the add-ons folder, because if we need to update that add-on later, it will overwrite the changes that we've made. I'm going to create a singleton for the purpose of calling showDialogBalloon. This may seem a little silly, but it will save us a lot of trouble if we do need to update Dialog Manager later. A singleton is basically, there's exactly one instance of it, and you can access it globally from anywhere in your code. At the moment, we have one singleton, also known as autoload, and it's actually Dialog Manager. What we're going to do is we're going to create a new script, and we're going to call it balloonfactory.gd. And the sole purpose of Balloon Factory will be to create dialog balloons. So we will copy showDialogBalloon, paste it in Balloon Factory, and then we're going to reverse all of the changes we previously made so that it's referring to Dialog Manager here. So dialog manager dot dialog resource, dialog manager dot get next dialog line, and I think that's actually everything. Also, setting balloon.pause mode here is unnecessary because what we can actually do is we can go to balloon and we can just set its pause mode in the inspector, which saves us a line of code. So we'll set that to process. Also, my personal convention is to capitalize the name of scripts and scenes, so I'm just going to do that with our balloon script and scene. In this script, we need to update this reference. To make Balloon Factory into an autoload, we go into Project, we go to the autoload page, and we search for the path, which in this case is right here. And then we just say add, and now we have that as an autoload. Then we go into NPC, and instead of calling it from the dialog manager, we call it from Balloon Factory. And now we no longer need to worry about updates to Dialog Manager. In terms of project organization, I think I would like to create a folder called Actors. The idea being that this will contain characters in the game. The hero, NPCs, and so forth. Enemies too. I'm going to move the hero in there, and I'm also going to create a folder called NPCs. And I will move our NPC scripts into there. Another important question is whether we want to save the raw PNGs for the hero and the NPCs in the actors folder or just have one big assets folder for everything. If we have one big folder for everything, there is eventually going to be a lot in there. So I think I might actually move some things which are associated with a specific actor to the appropriate folder. I'm going to move hero.png to the hero folder. And now I've added a bunch of new NPCs, and we'll talk about that in a moment, but I'm going to move all of those to the NPCs folder, and then in both of these folders I'm going to create an assets subfolder to hold the raw assets. So I think this will improve the organization of the project, and how you organize the project is important because it affects how fast you're able to find things. Now that those minor things are out of the way, I'd like to talk about something very important that I forgot about in the previous video. Last time I said that we want NPCs that allow us to use the same code for each NPC without having to hard code new values in. And we manage that with respect to the dialogue. However, one thing we also need to consider is the NPC's sprite, because we don't want all of our NPCs looking exactly the same. Right now, the sprite is effectively hard-coded. It's set in sprite, which is underneath the top-level NPC node, which makes it difficult to modify when we're placing NPCs in the world. So what I would like is the ability to simply drag a texture into an export variable of the NPC and use that to set the NPC's sprite in a way that's obvious in the editor. To start with, let's go to the NPC script, and I'm going to create a new export variable. And this variable is going to be the raw sprite sheet that we want to plug in for the NPC. We'll call it Spritesheet. And Spritesheet is of type texture. Now recall that our sprite is actually making use of villager01idle.tres. This is an AtlasTexture, which is looking at a specific raw sprite sheet. If we modify the underlying sprite sheet of this AtlasTexture, then we can change which NPC is displayed. And in fact, we can actually do this. But we also want to do this in a way where it will happen in the editor. And to make that happen, we need to make this a tool. So just a quick reminder, tool means that code is executed in the editor as well. Whenever we change the sprite sheet, we want the sprite to be updated. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a setGet called setSpritesheet. SetGet is a keyword that lets you specify a function that is called whenever you modify the attribute in question. So in this case, we're defining the setter function for Spritesheet. SetSpritesheet. Setters have one argument, which is the value you're setting them to, which in this case is a texture. And whenever we update the sprite sheet, we of course want to set sprite sheet to be the new value. And the reason that we have to specify this is because the setGet is overriding the default behavior for setting this variable. But in addition, we would also like to reach down into the sprite, reach down into the AtlasTexture that the sprite is using, and modify the texture of that AtlasTexture. So we're going to say sprite dot texture, so that grabs the AtlasTexture. And then let's go look at the documentation for AtlasTexture. So the underlying texture that the Atlas is looking at is called Atlas. Turning to the NPC, we will access the Atlas property of the AtlasTexture, and we're going to set it to be the new sprite sheet. And since this is a tool, this should happen in the editor when we make the change. Going to our test room, we see that the NPCs have vanished, which probably has something to do with the fact that the tool is now setting the sprite sheet to a null value. But not to worry, we're about to fix that. So the first NPC, who I think was Bob. Actually, let's just name him Bob. I'm not sure why I didn't do that before. Bob and John. So now we go into the NPC assets, and Bob is going to be the villager1 sprite sheet, which we'll drag to here. And you can see it immediately updates it, but it updates both of them. Now, why is this? The reason they're both updating is because villager1 idle, which actually I would like to rename, let's just call it NPC idle. NPC idle is a resource that is not local to the scene, which means whenever you modify it in one place, you modify it everywhere it's being used. To fix this, we go into villager1 idle, we go to resource, and we check the local to scene box. So what this does is the resource will be made unique in each instance of its local scene. So we can modify it in one instance without changing it for all of them. Returning to our room, Bob is the villager1 sprite, and let's use the villager2 sprite sheet for John. Okay, and that still changed both of them. If we go and look at the AtlasTexture that's in the NPC scene, it is not local to scene. So I think what we can do is just go and reload npc idle.tres. Oh, okay. I see villager1 idle is still there. So I think it's just because I must have saved this separately. We'll load this in. I'm going to delete villager1 idle. So now I go back to the test room, select Bob, and we drag villager1 back in here. And now you can see the NPCs are different. And what's even better is you can click on an NPC and you can see what sprite sheet it's using. So now it should be very easy for us to just add in all the NPCs we want, and from the top view here in the overall scene, we can see the dialogue they're using, the dialogue title they're using, and their sprite sheet. And we can edit those all from here, which will be very useful when designing levels. When we are designing a game, we don't just want to make it easy to play for the players, we also want to make it easy to design for the designers. So that's all I wanted to talk about today. And next time I will get into the camera movement that I was talking about at the end of the last episode. Thanks for watching.